Hello and welcome to a short video about the Navigator widget for the Web Portal Toolkit. Navigator really gives you a set of launchers, or a menu if you like, that allow you to access different functionality within your portal. For example, other applications, detail views that allow you to drill down into additional functionality that you want to provide, and URLs to access external websites. Here you can see a simple gateway that I've set up for the purposes of talking about the Navigator widget, and there are 4 instances of the Navigator available here. At the top I've got a vertical set of buttons and a horizontal set of buttons. Below, a vertical set of icons and a horizontal set of icons. So we can talk through how we can achieve those 2 styles and those 2 orientations. As I mentioned, there is a third type of Navigator widget, and that's the tile, and we're going to come on and look at that separately. For now, we're going to focus on these particular ones. So I've opened the config file for my application called Navigator, so config navigator.json within VS Code. Standard configuration file with all the headings and layouts and everything you would expect. If I get down to the widget section, you'll see the Navigator widget, and for now I have 4 instances of the Navigator. Just to refresh your memory, I have the vertical buttons, the horizontal buttons, the vertical icons and the horizontal icons. So reflected back here within 1, 2, 3 and 4 instances of the widget. To keep things simple, you'll see that I've contracted the area called layout records, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But let's concentrate on the key settings that are available. Now, a couple here are pretty standard and fairly obvious. So I have the disabled setting, whether I want the widget to appear or not. I have the placeholder to say where it's going to go on the screen. I've created, in this case, a setting called comment, which actually doesn't have any meaning to WPT at all. It does mean I can make a comment to show which instance of the Navigator widget I'm interested in this particular case. Now, in what we're talking about today, the 2 key settings we're interested in are the type and the orientation. So type can be buttons or icon table, or the third choice that we're going to come on to in a minute. The orientation, as you would probably guess, could be horizontal or scrolling down vertical. So the combination of those 2 really gives you, do you want buttons or icons? Do you want vertical or do you want horizontal? So to keep things a little bit simpler, I've removed 3 of the instances, and as you can see in the gateway, we just have the vertical set of buttons. So I've just got the instance within my configuration of vertical buttons. Now down here, as you probably know in VS Code, you can expand and contract sections of, in this case, your JSON file, but any kind of code file that you're editing. And you can see I jumped from 43 to 93, so the layout records takes up quite a few lines here, but I've closed them down. So let's expand that and start to take a look at what's going on. And again, just to try and make it easier for you to follow along, I'm going to compress 3 of those layout records, and we're just going to look at the first. Now, effectively, you need a section within the configuration for each of the Navigator buttons or icons that you're going to work with. So here is our section for the first button there, reporting. First of all, give it a unique identifier, which may or may not match the label. It doesn't really, well, it certainly doesn't need to, but in this case it does. So an identifier that's unique, and a label which is the word that's going to appear on the button. You're then going to decide what is the type of this button, and there are 3 choices. The first that you can see here is application, which allows you to launch to a different application within the current gateway. The second, which we'll come on to in the moment, is the detail view, so you can go to a particular detail view. And the third is a setting for URL, where you can effectively open a particular URL either where you are or more likely in a different tab to show a different website or a web page. But for now, let's start off talking about application. So from this reporting button, I want to go into a different application within my gateway. Now, if I go to the gateway and I go to applications, this is one of my test sites, so I have all sorts of things under here. But what I'm going to do is jump to a particular application here called KPI. And I've done the screen narrow. Let's just expand it. It's just a simple site we elaborated on for a particular customer. But here you can see it shows a chart using Google Charts, and it shows some KPI indicators that were relevant to the customer we built this for. So effectively, I want my reporting button to take me to this application. So if I go back to Navigator and I come in here, I click on the reporting button and it jumps to KPIs, albeit within a narrow browser window. Be warned that if you do jump to a different application, you're going to have to ask to go to the menu and go back to the first one you were on. So let's talk about how we configure that reporting button. Type is application, then you need to set the application name that you're going to jump to, in this case KPI, and there's various other choices, again discussed in much more detail within the TRG, but very straightforward. So let's move on to the second option for a Navigator button. And if I click on view my invoices, what we want to do is open a detailed view. Now, first of all, let's take a step back on a detailed view. So here's another portal, something more typical, in this case a vendor portal. And we've got a number of different widgets that you're probably accustomed to. Over here, we've got a basic search widget with a list of documents, in this case invoices. Now this is my home page that I'm looking at. If I click on an invoice to view it, then up comes the viewer page. Now this is actually a detailed view. In WPT behind the scenes, we actually don't do anything. We don't move pages. We're still on exactly the same page. But we use a process of hiding and showing objects on that page that gives the impression that we're moving from one page to another. From the home page, we click on something and that takes us to the corresponding detail page. Of course, I can hit the home button and I go back to my home page. So at its simplest level, WPT allows you to go from home page to detail back to the home page. You can do more than that, but let's keep it simple for this particular topic. So moving back to our example, what I want to do is have a button to view my invoices. Now, this could be really useful because perhaps I do want the ability to view any invoices for my company, but I don't want to waste the screen estate at the home page. There might be so much information I need to gather on there that I can keep some space. And this is one way that we could do it. We could have a navigator that just literally has a view my invoices button. And when I click on it, it's going to take me to the detail view. And in this case, with a list of my invoices, viewing the first one automatically, and then with the addition of the document info widget down here, where I can choose to look at things like keywords, notes, related documents, document information, and even the history of the document as we go through it. When I press the home page, it takes me back to our home view, to my buttons, including of course my view my invoices button. So how do we implement that? Well, let's expand the next layout record, and in here you can see we've got a layout record for the invoices button. I've got a label of view my invoices, and you can see that in this case doesn't match the identifier. As I said before, they don't have to. I've then got a type of detail view. So we're going to go from this particular button to a detail view. And in this case, and I don't want to get into this in too much detail, but I'm going to go to a detail view called the Invoices Advanced Flex View. And effectively that's predefined further down in my config file, another topic for another day, but we effectively want to fire through to that. And again, very simple configuration, having set my text, having chosen detail view, that detail view name, the invoice is advanced. When I click on view my invoice, then I can see that detail view that allows me to view my invoices and its associated information. The third button, I'm going to look at doing a URL. So again, let's expand this to full screen. When I hit About Highland, you'll notice another tab opens within my browser, and in this case, with my gateway still open, in the new tab I've loaded the Highland Software Wikipedia page. So it's just opened a URL within a new tab from my button. So in configuration, let's expand the layout record for the third button. Identifier and label of About Highland, so the words on it are going to match that. It's going to be of type URL, and then correspondingly here's the URL that I'm going to open within a new tab. And talking of that, you see there's a setting here, use same window, where I can open the URL within the window of my gateway. Probably not what I want generally, so I'll set that to false, and it's going to open a new tab to show me that particular URL. So when I click on About Highland, up comes a new tab, but I can close that or leave it open and go back to my gateway as I wish. The final button on here is kind of a combination of the two above it. And what I want to do is effectively create a way of providing help to the gateway that I'm looking at. So on the help button here, as I click it, what I want to do is open a URL, but in this case, rather than in a new tab, I want to open it in a detail view. So if I click on help, you can see it goes to a detail view that is literally one widget on a page, and in that full widget, which is an HTML content widget, then I'm going to open the URL. It's nothing clever. It is purely about making use of the detail view concept again. And in here, there's my fourth button. It's of type detail view, and it's a flex view called help. And again, within there, I can define the layout of my detail view, customize it. But from the point of view of Navigator, really easy to choose the options between an application within my gateway, a detail view within my gateway, or a URL that I just want to show and make available to my users. Okay, so we've looked at the buttons, we've talked about the basic settings around whether we want buttons or we want icons, we want vertical or we want horizontal. Let's take a look at the final missing piece there, which is how we switch to the icon way of presenting the Navigator rather than button. So again, I've just modified the application slightly to keep it simple, but we have one instance of the Navigator widget, but I've switched across from buttons to icons. Everything else still works the same. If I go to reporting, then I'm going to go to my KPI application and back to my Navigator. I'm going to go to my detail view with my invoices. I'm going to open a new tab showing the Highland Software Wiki page. And then, of course, click on help. I'm going to go to another detail view, this time with one HTML content widget showing that same Wikipedia page. The only difference, of course, is rather than those big green buttons, I've now gone to some text with an associated icon. So let's go and see how that's configured. Very straightforward. Everything is pretty much as we talked about before. The type is the only thing that really changes, and from the setting button it becomes icon table, and that gives us the icon view rather than that. If I expand layout records, they are fundamentally exactly the same, with one important addition, and that is this set of icon configuration. So in our launch record, we have the same stuff we had before. We have the fact that we've got a navigator called reporting that's based on link to another application, and in this case going to go to the KPI application. But now I can display an icon. I can choose which icon I want, and we'll come back to how we find the one we want here. I can set a background to the icon, and I can set height and width to the icon to do it. So in the case of the layout records, for the 4 layout records, I've got reporting going to an icon called WPT font insert chart outlined. I've got invoices going to a document icon. I've got about Highland going to an info icon, and I've got help going to a help icon, which come across as these 4 icons we have here. So that's how you configure it. Now, where do these icons come from? Now, every WPT gateway that you set up is already configured with a glyph font called WPT font. Now, if you're not familiar with the term, a glyph font is effectively a font created of icons, and we have one built in. There's many very widely used ones, things like Font Awesome, but in our case we've created our own font to do that. Now, if you want to see what we have, you go to your gateway within IIS and expand Assets, WPT, and Fonts. You'll see a folder called WPT Font version 1, and you can expand that. And effectively, this is that font, and it's the icons that we use for all of our widgets and parts of WPT. If you open the file demo.html and expand it, you get a page that effectively shows you all of the icons that are available to you. And you can see at the top here over 1,200 icons that are available. So if you wanted this kind of recycling icon, this is the name that you would use within the configuration. And there's a number of places within WPT where you can use WPT font icons. But for now, for our Navigator widget, you can take your time browsing through here, or you can do what I generally do, which is to use Control F for search. And for example, I'll look for something to do with info. I've got 4 possible. So I've got this one, which is probably the one I'm going to use. So I'm going to highlight that and make a copy. But let's have a look at the others. I can go on to the next. Okay, so that's a filled in version. It's pretty similar. And then there's another variation on an information on a little phone or something like that. I'll stick with the first one I've got. But effectively, by copying that text, you can then go over into your configuration. It's probably even already the one I have here, but let's delete that. Whoops. And paste it in, and you can see now into the classes, it's now put the icon that I want to use, and that will be reflected within our gateway as the icon that you want to use here. So to finish off, let's take a look at the last type that I've mentioned a couple of times, but look in more detail. And that last type is what we call tile. And you can see from the screen here, it lends itself to more of a kind of full page menu approach. You can choose whatever images you like. So I've gone with this sort of color, slightly cartoony. If you wanted black and white, you want more monochrome, whatever, you just go and search the images that you want to use in this case. Optionally, on each tile navigator, you can also have the ability to have text appearing as you scroll across, so you can set the text there so that you can get more explanation if you need to. You don't have to, you can turn that off as well if you like. But as you would expect, as you click on the icons, just like the navigation that we've already looked at, you can go off into another application, you can go into a detail view, or you can pull up a particular URL. When you finish with an application, at the moment, the way this is configured is you find the tile application to go back to the menu, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But that's fundamentally the purpose of the tile widget. If I jump across to VS Code, you'll see the normal Navigator widget within the widget section of the configuration. You'll see an instance of the Navigator, and in here the only real change from what we've already discussed is that we would set the type to be tiles. So we're going to get that tile approach. In the layout records, you have a layout record for each of the Navigator options that same as you have in the past. Again, most things are the same, the type is the same. If you choose application, you have to specify the application name and so on. But then we get into an additional section here that defines the interface of the tile itself. First of all, you give a URL to the image. Now this can be relative to the gateway, and I've kind of got into the habit that I put it within custom assets. Now bear in mind, everything in the custom folder is ignored when you upgrade WPT. So if you put a new version on, this will be left exactly as it is. Below that, I've got into the habit of creating an assets folder, and in this case, below that, I've created a tile images, and that's where I put the wallet, the books, attendance, and so on, the images that I'm going to use. I've commented out here, but there's settings around image background. At the moment, I'm leaving that out. Again, like all the settings, they're discussed within the Webport Toolkit TRG. The description is the text that will appear should you choose to have that kind of pop-up text appear with more description. And then you have the image height and the image width. Now, if it doesn't match the image, it will scale. So the image you will see will be 256 by 256. If your image file is either smaller or bigger, it will scale accordingly. I generally try and match the two things up. So my images will be 256 by 256 pixels in this case, so that we don't have to get into any scaling issues. But you don't have to if you don't need to. You can also have the option of suppressing the label, and the label is the text below the button, so you don't have to have that either. So you set those up for each of your buttons, pointing to the right image with the right text, and then you set the type and the additional configuration settings as you would before. Finally, just to pick up one loose end that we had there, if I go into one of these, the time and attendance, pretty randomly at the moment, goes into an application I have to display videos within WPT. You'll notice I have the home button, but all that's going to do is take me to the home within this application, and I'm already on it. It's not going to take me back to my tile. So what I have to do at the moment is go to my application menu, choose tile, and that will take me back there. It'd be nicer if I could do that a little bit more gracefully. What about, for example, putting a button onto the screen to say return to main menu? And in fact, that's exactly what we're going to do now. Back in VS Code, at the moment I'm in the config for the tile, the menu. I'm going to close that, and I'm actually going to go to the application that I'm going to, which in my case is called video, and I'm going to go into config video.json. And without going into this in too much detail, I've got a basic search widget, which is a list of videos, and a basic viewer to display that video within it. What I want to do is add a navigator to this application to send me back to the main menu. To save a bit of time, I've already created the code in here, and I'm going to paste it in, and we'll just go through and discuss it. So in here I've got a navigator widget. It's going to go actually in placeholder 1 the top left of my layout. It's going to be buttons, and it's going to go to an application. I'm going to change the label to be return to tile page. Obviously it could be any text that you want, and I'm going to set the application name to tile, which is my current application. Save that. Going to log out and do a quick refresh. Log back in there, and now if I go to time and attendance, I've still got the same application in here, but you'll notice I've got return to tile page up here, and I can just click on there to go back to the menu, in and out. So you can use the Navigator in its own right to send you back from where you came. For more information, search Web Portal Toolkit on the Highland community for our community site. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us at wpt@highland.com.